Her name was Margaret. At least, that's what she called herself. The name had come to her one afternoon while staring at her reflection in the sliding glass door. The creature looking back at her had bright, alert eyes, a soft gray face, and long whiskers that twitched with intelligence. There was no doubt about it. She was a human. Granted, she walked on 4 legs. Granted, she had a tail. Granted, she was technically a raccoon. But Margaret was certain these were temporary inconveniences. She lived behind a small blue house at the edge of town in a maple tree that she considered a studio apartment with skylight. Every morning, she climbed down at precisely 7:12 a.m. because humans, she knew, respected schedules, and sat on the back porch steps waiting for Mrs. Dalloway, the elderly woman who lived inside, to come out with her tea. Margaret liked Mrs. Dalloway. The woman spoke constantly, which Margaret interpreted as evidence of deep friendship. "Well, good morning, you little bandit," Mrs. Dalloway would say, setting down a saucer with bits of toast. Bandit. Margaret found the term mildly offensive. She preferred independent urban forager. Still, she accepted the toast graciously. Humans ate bread. Therefore, she ate bread. This was how civilization worked. Margaret spent her afternoons observing the neighborhood from atop the fence. She studied the rituals of her fellow humans carefully. Humans carried rectangular objects and stared into them with grave seriousness. So Margaret once tried to carry a rectangle too, a piece of bark she found near the shed. She held it in her paws and gazed at it intently for nearly 20 minutes. Nothing happened. She concluded her bark device needed charging. Humans also wore clothing. Margaret attempted this once with a dish towel she liberated from Mrs. Dalloway's laundry line. It did not drape as elegantly as she'd imagined. It tangled around her hind legs and caused her to fall off the porch railing, which was deeply embarrassing. Luckily, no one was filming. The most frustrating thing about being a human, Margaret found, was communication. She had much to say, opinions mostly. Observations about garbage can security, thoughts on bird feeder placement, concerns about the neighbor's cat who clearly lacked ambition. But whenever she attempted to speak, it came out as chittering. This was not the refined, articulate voice she felt inside. One evening, as the sun stretched gold across the yard, Margaret saw something extraordinary. Through the open kitchen window, she watched Mrs. Dalloway sitting at her table, staring at a small, glowing screen. The woman sighed, wiped at her eyes, and whispered, "I miss you." Margaret tilted her head. The room looked quiet, lonely. Without fully thinking it through, Margaret climbed onto the windowsill and slipped inside. She landed softly on the counter, then padded across to the table. Mrs. Dalloway gasped. Margaret stood tall, well, as tall as possible, and placed one paw gently on the woman's arm. This, she felt certain, was a very human gesture. They stared at one another. Margaret poured every ounce of sophisticated humanity into her expression. "I understand complex emotions," her eyes said. "I too contemplate existence." Mrs. Dalloway's surprise melted into something softer. She let out a small, watery laugh. "Well," she murmured, stroking Margaret's head, "aren't you just the sweetest little thing?" Margaret leaned into the touch. In that moment, something shifted. Perhaps being human wasn't about walking upright, or wearing towels, or holding rectangles. Perhaps it was about sitting beside someone who felt alone and choosing to stay. Margaret purred, a deeply undignified but satisfying sound. She would continue refining her speech later. For now, she had important human work to do. She curled into Mrs. Dalloway's lap as if she'd always belonged there. And if she still climbed trees and washed her food in puddles and occasionally knocked over the trash can at midnight, well, humans, after all, are imperfect creatures.